नमस्कार मंडळी. माझं नाव जयदीप बालेकर. मी सिन्सिनाटी ओहायोचा रहिवासी आहे. ओरिजिनली मी पुण्याचा आहे. 2007 मध्ये मी US ला मूव्ह झालो फॉर माय अंडरग्रॅड एज्युकेशन इन कम्प्युटर इंजिनिअरिंग. मूव्ह डाऊन टू टेक्सास आणि अंडरग्रॅड डिग्री मी टेक्सास A&M मधनं मिळवली आणि त्याच्यानंतर मी सिन्सिनाटीला 2011 मध्ये मूव्ह झालो फॉर ग्रॅज्युएट स्कूल. आणि 2013 ते 2023 मी डेलॉइट कन्सल्टिंग मध्ये नोकरीला होतो. तिथे मी सायबर सिक्युरिटी कन्सल्टिंग डोमेन मध्ये होतो. आणि जवळपास कोविडच्या दरम्यान आय स्टार्टेड इन्व्हेस्टिंग इन रिअल इस्टेट. माझा फिरतीचा जॉब असल्यामुळे आय वॉज रीडिंग अ लॉट ऑफ रिअल इस्टेट बुक्स आणि इन्व्हेस्टमेंट्स, फायनान्शियल फ्रीडम, ॲसेट्स, लायबिलिटीज, all that kind of stuff, and it really got me intrigued. आणि around late 2019 is when I took my first leap, आणि me and my wife bought a 8-unit property here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and that kind of got me started on this journey. आणि हा गर्जे मराठी इनिशिएटिव्ह especially for CRE, I thought it was a fantastic initiative. कारण in general जर आपण बघितलं तर मराठी कम्युनिटी entrepreneurship मध्ये आणि इन्व्हेस्टमेंट्स मध्ये एवढी ऍक्टिव्ह नाही आहे. But I think connecting all the Marathi people through this group and doing some educational webinars and providing support to one another can actually change that. And some of the content I have is also about mindset, and really we need to get in the right mindset to start embarking on this journey. So hopefully the presentation will be helpful. I wanted to keep it pretty short, but bakta bakta actually I've racked up quite a few slides, so bear with me, and I will keep maybe 30 minutes towards the end for Q&A. पण मी माझी Calendly link पण शेवटी तिकडे टाकली आहे presentation मध्ये, so we can also have one-on-one conversations. So with that, we will get started. And by default, everybody is muted, but if you have any questions, you can drop them in the Q&A box. And after the presentation, I will unmute everyone, so we can also do a live Q&A. So with that being said, if I'm audible, just give me a thumbs up or type in the comments section if I'm audible. Perfect. Great. Awesome. Thank you. So we are also recording this session. That way the recording will be shared with anyone who was not able to make it today. And we'll also put it on YouTube. So let's see here. I'll start sharing my screen. So the topic for today is really financial freedom and generational wealth through multifamily real estate investing. But I will also be touching upon real estate in general, and why real estate? Why is this such an amazing asset class that we should all be involved in? So with that being said, let me start moving here. Just a quick disclaimer, this is not a legal tax advice. This is not an investment advice. So any specific legal, tax, or investing questions you may have, I would recommend talk to your CPA, attorney, or financial advisor. This is supposed to be a purely educational webinar. And of course, we are going to cover most of the content at a fairly high level. So if you want to deep dive, I'm always happy to do one-on-one calls. At a high level, this is our team. That's me. I spoke a little bit about my background in computer science, cyber risk, and then got into real estate in late 2019. We primarily focus only on apartments. So commercial, residential is the asset class. And we have about a little over 500 apartments here in the Cincinnati area. My partner, Jason Bake, he comes from a data science background. He lives in New Jersey. He was also in his W-2 until a couple of years ago and has transitioned now to full-time real estate. Lisa Lay, who also happens to be my wife, also comes with an IT background. She still works full-time with Anthem Insurance, but she provides some support for us in terms of asset management and tracking property management data. Alex Stam is one of our other partners. He lives in the Lake Tahoe, California area. He's a chiropractor and a physician by trade, but heavily invested in real estate and passionate about real estate. So he helps us with investor relations and marketing. And finally, John Stanley, who comes from a investment banking Wall Street background, and he's more of our financial advisor or economic advisor. So we usually pick his brain about what are the Feds going to do and what the market looks like a year from now, because he's very much closely integrated with capital markets, commodities market. So we usually rely on his judgment for making some of these long-term bets, if you will. These are some of our mentors and advisors. Marco Barbaro, he's used to be a chef, has a degree in information systems, and for the last 10 plus years has been a multifamily investor, has ownership in over 2,500 apartment units. Vinay Chopra, also a resident of Danville, California, is one of my other mentors, originally a mechanical engineer with an MBA, but now a full-time real estate investor. At his peak, he had 8,000 apartment units under management, and now he focuses primarily on senior living as an asset class. And Hadar Orkibi, who is a New Zealand-based real estate investor, invests primarily in the US. And this just shows that you can be basically located anywhere on the face of the planet and invest where the numbers make sense. So without further ado, some of these early sections I'm going to skip and focus primarily on educational content. We believe in being data-driven, coming from engineering backgrounds. I think data is key. If you lose sight of data, you don't really have a business. So you have to be focused on data, which is why we are extremely data-driven. We are process-focused. Every year, we are trying to improve our processes and how we can gain efficiency. And finally, we are hands-on, and which is why we invest in our local market. Our local market in Cincinnati, in general, Midwestern markets are known for a combination of cash flow and appreciation, but also real estate, especially commercial real estate, is truly a business. It is a lot of work. It's not a side gig or side hustle. It is a full-time job. And if we are geographically disconnected from our assets, it's going to be very difficult for us to manage them well, which is why we are very hands-off and invest only in our backyard in the greater Cincinnati area, and also looking at Indianapolis, Columbus. So everything in the 1.5 hour driving distance from us. We have a construction management team in-house. As I spoke about, we are geographically extremely hyper-focused because we understand the market, sub-markets, and block by block, geography of the city. We are very much operations oriented. So we do asset management in-house. And then now we are also bringing in property management in-house by partnering up with another company, a friend of mine for last 4 years. They built a property management company and really good systems around property management. So we are trying to bring everything in-house. That way we have full control over the entire life cycle of the deal, that we don't have to rely on any third party for any aspect of the deal. So this was our investment journey. In late 2019, it started with 2 4-family buildings, small multifamily here in Cincinnati, and they were extremely distressed. So this building did not have a roof. The balconies had collapsed, all new plumbing, all new electrical, interior, exterior rehab. So that was a huge learning experience for me. This was bought by just me and my wife using our savings. And then for the rehab, we had a HELOC on our personal home to fund the rehab. Initially, I thought it's going to take $70,000 to fix the place up. It ended up taking $230,000 to fix the place up. But because the location was fantastic, we came out just fine. We were able to do a cash out refinance twice on this property. So essentially, we have no money invested in this property now, but it cash flows $500 per unit or $4,000 for the property every month. So when we realized that this is achievable and this is possible, that's when it was an aha moment for me that, okay, this is actually achievable and let's keep on doing it. So then another 10 unit, 4 unit, 8 units, then our first joint venture deal with investors involved 63 units, 32. And it was just, we kept on going after these mid-sized properties. And now we are trying to target anything 50 units and up and work with investors. That way we have economies of scale and common interests across the team to pursue larger deals. Also with larger deals, because of economies of scale, you get better return on your time, because on a smaller property, you're still going there every day, overseeing the contractors, overseeing the work, financing, the entire end-to-end process, which we'll also talk about. But it's going to take you about the same amount of time as it will on a 50-unit property. But now on a larger deal, you have a team because the pie is bigger, so you can actually split it across multiple team members. And that way you don't have to spend all of your time. You can lean on your team as well. And that way you can get a better return on your time And then you can also do other projects on the side, other investment opportunities that you can chase. So I want to start off by just talking a little bit about investor mindset. आणि मेनली मला माइंडसेट बद्दल असं बोलायचं आहे, कारण ॲज अ मराठी माय अपब्रिंगिंग वॉज एज्युकेशन एज्युकेशन एज्युकेशन. पहिले अभ्यासाकडे लक्ष, आणि मग अभ्यासाकडे लक्ष, त्याच्यानंतर जॉब, चांगला जॉब, चांगला एम्प्लॉयर, त्याच्यानंतर फॅमिली, अँड दॅट्स इट. एज्युकेशन, जॉब, फॅमिली, गुड रिटायरमेंट, have a comfortable, happy life. That is kind of our mindset. And there is nothing wrong with that mindset. It is a perfectly good mindset. And I've seen my parents, my ancestors being very happy with the outcomes that they have received. But to some extent, it is also our mindset, because in India, we are always in survival mode. And we have to get the basics done so that we'll have a comfortable life. But here in the US, there is abundance in everything. So in abundance, then you don't have to be really in that survival mindset. You need to be in growth mindset. And if you look at America as a country, it's a capitalistic nation, and it was built by entrepreneurs. And if we look at the tax code here, it is designed to help investors and entrepreneurs, and it is designed to penalize W2 workers. So W2 workers pay majority of the taxes in this country, and all the tax breaks are given to investors and entrepreneurs. And when you start realizing those things, it makes sense to start looking at other investment opportunities. And eventually those investment opportunities could turn into your primary source of income and your main business. So I would like to say that we have to start thinking first. Thinking and thoughts drive feelings, feelings to emotions, emotions to motivations to actions, and finally you start seeing the results. So with that being said, why real estate? What is our purpose? So a lot of people think की रिअल इस्टेट इन्व्हेस्टर म्हणजे रे इट्स ऑल अबाउट मनी. आणि इन जनरल आपला मराठी माइंडसेट म्हणजे कसं असतो की अरे काय पैसा पैसा पैसा, पैसाचं काय, हॅपीनेस इज मोर इम्पॉर्टंट, अँड विच इज व्हेरी ट्रू. पण without paisa, happiness is not possible either. So you need some financial security to be happy, which is why I think it has to be a very good balance that you are looking at your financial freedom. Financial freedom creates time freedom. Current, let's say now the economy is not doing very good, and we are seeing layoffs happening. And if your job is your only source of income, it's going to put you in a bit of a stressful situation. Ki, oh, we don't know what's happening, how the market's going to shape up. If you have financial freedom, if you are getting income from other sources, where your job is something you're doing because you love it, not because you absolutely need it, that puts you in a much more of a comfortable situation. So I think financial freedom for me was the number one goal. And then once you have financial freedom, it creates freedom of time, because then now you're like, you know what, I can take 6 months sabbatical from my job and go travel the world, because I'm okay with having 6 months of unpaid time off. And I want to have experiences. And that is something your investments can enable you to do. And finally, geographical freedom. Eventually, if you decide that, okay, now I don't need my job anymore, I do have the freedom of, or financial freedom and freedom of time, now you can actually live anywhere you want. You can live in India and have all of your investments in the US. You can go live in Mexico, Bali, Indonesia. You can live wherever you like to live. And that offers a geographic freedom as well, geographical freedom. So those three aspects were kind of fascinating for me. And that's why I embarked on this journey. So FDR said, real estate cannot be lost or stolen, nor can it be carried away. Purchased with common sense, paid for in full, and managed with reasonable care, it should be care, it is about the safest investment in the world. And that still holds true. I mean, across all the assets you look at, real estate is a hard commodity. It's a hard asset. It cannot vaporize. It's not a paper asset. So land and bricks will always hold value. The value will go up and down based on the market cycle, but at least you will get preservation of capital, because it will always hold value. So this is called as the cash flow quadrant. Some of you may have read the book by Robert Kiyosaki called The Cash Flow Quadrant. And Robert Kiyosaki's first book, which was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, these two books were instrumental in shaping up my mindset about investing. Because before that, I was actually just saving up all my salary as much as possible. I paid down all my debt, no credit card debt, no car debt. We paid down our home mortgage in 4 years because that's how we have been raised. Debt is bad. And that is not a wrong lesson, but in India, debt is very expensive, 9, 10, 12, 14% rate of interest. And when you're paying a rate of interest that high, that may not really be an asset. It is bad. But here, of course, now the interest rates have gone up to sevens and mid sevens, but it is still historically at one of the lowest rates. So here in capitalistic world where debt is easily available and it's relatively cheap, you can use debt as a tool. So that is the mindset that was changed for me when I started reading some of these books. So if we look at the cash flow quadrant, the top left quadrant is employee quadrant, where you have a job, you provide a service, you put in your time, you get a paycheck, and you pay portion of that, a pretty decent portion of that, to Uncle Sam. 35 to 46%, depending on which income bracket and which state you're in. So after that, you have self-employment. So that is like being a CPA and having your own practice, being a doctor, having your own practice, or an attorney. So in that case, yes, you have a little more control, but the day you stop working, your patients are going to stop seeing you, or your clients are going to stop seeing you. So you're still putting in your time, and you're basically trading your time for money. There are some tax benefits for being self-employed. You can write off your home office and things like that. So a little better in terms of tax benefits as compared to employees. After that, we have the business owner quadrant. So that's where you start leveraging. You start leveraging a system and processes that you build. You start leveraging people that work for you. So now we have some leverage, and that leverage is producing you income. So when you have a good team and you have great people working for you and great systems in place, even if you're gone for 1 week, the machine keeps running, you keep getting paid. And as a business owner, you get a lot of tax benefits. For example, Section 179 write-off for vehicles. Any vehicle over 6,000 pounds, you can write it off. Any business trips that you take, you can write off that expense. Home office, stationery, gas, mileage. There are unlimited write-offs that you get access to. So the IRS now begins to reward you. Why does it reward you? Because as a business owner, you're creating jobs and you're paying back the country by creating jobs and creating opportunities. And then finally, the investor quadrant. So of course, you cannot start in this quadrant because you need some capital to deploy and become an investor. But once you have decent amount of capital, you want to really start thinking about investing, because now you're actually using your money as a leverage. So now your money is working for you in this quadrant, which is the completely opposite of the employee quadrant where you are working for money. So now you deploy this capital smartly in different asset classes, diversification. You look at risk adjusted returns and make sure that you have different types of investments, one focused on appreciation, one focused on cash flow, maybe one focused on a combination of two, to make sure that you have a good, diverse investment portfolio. And therefore, now what you're doing in this quadrant is you're increasing your assets, reducing your liabilities, and the assets produce income that can now fund your liabilities. So instead of buying a fancy car right now and moving into a $5 million home right now on a paycheck, if you are able to cut down your expenses today and put those in assets, down the road in 10 to 15 years, those assets will pay you residual income, passive income that now can fund your vacations, your Porsches, your fancy home, all of that stuff, right? And eventually even your kids' college tuition and all of that. So I've seen people, instead of 529 plan, they just bought one investment property. And by the time their kid goes to school, that investment property is worth 4 times the college tuition for their kid, which is a much wiser investment choice. I'm not proposing that, just throwing that out as an idea. Now, in terms of investments and especially real estate, you get cash flow, you get appreciation. It depends on how much appreciation and cash flow you get will depend on market cycles. But if you are willing to hold the investment long term, then you get a bit of both and your tax liabilities go down. So you get the best of all worlds when you start investing in some of these asset classes. So really, why real estate, right? I think one is generate passive income. Now, I want to say that with a caveat that nothing is passive in life. Somebody has to be active. So as long as you have a partner, a team who is active, and you invest with them passively, it could be passive. Another way to invest passively is by investing in a REIT or funds. REITs and funds are basically like investing in S&P 500 index fund. You put it, it's diversified, someone is managing it, you see the returns, but you don't exactly know what's happening with that money, where is it invested, how is each property in that portfolio performing. So you lose a lot of control, but it is truly passive. So passive income is, that's why I wanted to throw out that caveat. If you buy a property yourself, it's not passive. You'll have to put in the work. Even if it's a single family home, you will have to manage the tenant, manage the maintenance. And then once you scale up and get a multifamily property or large commercial property, it's not as passive, because larger property needs more work and more everyday attention from you for asset management and different phases of the property life cycle. Second is build resilience during recessions. So usually real estate is very recession resistant, and especially certain asset classes within real estate, like apartments, because everybody needs a roof over their head. And that's why apartments are always full. Not, it doesn't depend on the market cycle. The rents may stop going up in a recession, but at least you're collecting rents. Leverage tax benefits. So there are several tax benefits, and this can be a conversation topic on its own. But depreciation is one thing that you get when you own a commercial property. So essentially, although your property is going up in value, as long as you hold it, IRS says that all the fixtures and roof and appliances and carpets, they go down in value as they get used. So you calculate that number with the help of your CPA, and that becomes your depreciation, which is basically a negative number, and that offsets your income generated from the property. And that negative number is actually not a true loss, it's basically a paper loss. And that basically brings your tax liability down to zero in many cases. Another tax advantage is 1031 exchange, where you bought a property, you improved it, and now you sold it. Let's say you bought it for $1 million, sold it for $3 million. Now that $2 million in capital gain, you can do a 1031 exchange and buy a like kind property, another property, and you don't have to pay the capital gains. So there are many such advantages, tax advantages with real estate. We have a webinar about tax implications that we have on YouTube channel if you would like to check it out. Preserve capital, again, because it's a hard asset. Rather than investing in a paper, stock, or Bitcoin, or something virtual, which you absolutely have no control over, this is an actual property that you can control. And at least it will have some value, even if you don't control it well. Even if it goes downhill and you operate it poorly, it will still have some intrinsic value. So you'll never lose all of your capital. And number 5 is forced appreciation. We'll talk a little bit about this topic. This is true only for commercial real estate. Single family homes, the appraisal and the value of it depends completely on market cycles and what the market is doing. But in commercial real estate, of course, it depends on market, but it also depends on what you can do with the NOI of the property, or net operating income of the property, and value of the property depends on that. So based on your operations, you can increase the value of the property. So we'll be covering that as well. So real estate investment types. I put this slide together because there were some questions in our Garje Marathi WhatsApp group. Ki REITs versus funds, land investing, selling real estate, and being an agent. There are so many different ways to get involved in real estate. And I might have missed a few in here. And I personally focus on commercial residential investing, which is apartments. So I'm by no means an expert on all of these other topics, because you can build a career on each one of these topics individually. So there are transactional ways to get involved in real estate. One is wholesaling, where what you do is you cold call people that, hey, you have a property for sale. Sometimes it's a distressed property. Sometimes there are a motivated seller because there was a death in the family and the kid inherited the property that he doesn't want, stuff like that. So these wholesalers are always calling people, hey, do you want to sell your property? And they oftentimes get the property at a deep discount. And then they sell it on the market for another 10, 20, $50,000 in profit. So they just put their margins on it and sell it. Oftentimes they sell it to people who fix and flip. So flippers buy properties from wholesalers many times, and then they will buy a property that doesn't look really good. They'll fix it up, interiors, exteriors, make it look beautiful, and then they'll put it on market on MLS. That's how we'll find properties on Redfin, Zillow, and then they'll make a profit. They'll take a cut for all the work that they have put in. And then finally, real estate sales, which is being a real estate broker or an agent, and you get a commission for every sale you make. But you have to remember that all of these activities are transactional. So the moment you stop doing it, your paycheck stops. So it's like running on a treadmill, very similar to our jobs. You cannot say that, okay, I want to take a break for a couple of years. The paycheck is going to stop for those couple of years, and maybe you may not even have the job by the time you get back. So these are transactional investments, if you will. On the right side, these are true investments for long-term wealth. So they will continue to pay you cash flow. The cash flow will go up and down based on the property performance and also based on the market cycle. But these are the only vehicles that will give you some cash flow or dividends, if you will. Land investing is one type. So land investing typically does not give you cash flow unless you have a land lease. So if you buy land and somebody puts a building on it, you own the land, building is owned by somebody else, and they're leasing the land from you. That way you're getting cash flow. This is a fairly passive way of investing because you're not putting in the work. The building is owned, managed, operated by somebody else. You only own the land. Depending on how the lease is made, you at most would have to pay the taxes on the land. If it's a complete triple net lease, you don't even have to worry about anything. The guy who's leasing the land from you, will pay taxes and landscaping on that land and all the expenses associated with that. Single family residential investing is basically how a lot of us get started. We buy a single family home in the neighborhood that we live in because we see that property values are going up in this area. It's a beautiful area. But what happens is, a lot of times when we are personally living in fantastic neighborhoods, Class A neighborhoods, great schools, you end up overpaying for these properties, or at least pay retail prices for these properties. And then you rent them out, and then you realize that these properties don't cash flow. Because let's say you get $2,000 in rent, but your mortgage payments, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance might be $1,800. And the remaining $200, you start seeing that as a cash flow. But once in a year, the HVAC goes out, and now you had to pay $5,000 for a new HVAC, and there goes your cash flow. So it doesn't cash flow very well. It might appreciate over time, but you cannot bank on these investments that, okay, if tomorrow I lose a job, I have these 3 single family homes that I can live on. That usually does not happen. You might need hundreds of single family homes, and that too in different types of neighborhoods where you get better cash flow. But managing 100 single family homes can be rather cumbersome. So that's kind of single family home investing. Commercial residential investing is apartment complexes. That's kind of what we do. So here you get a little bit more economies of scale. You have to do commercial projects typically with a team. So if you alternatively, let's say if you have $50 million in capital, you can go buy a large commercial property by yourself. You don't need a team as equity partners, but you would still need a team as employees who can manage this asset unless you're doing this full time. Because managing a large property is a full-time job. You need maintenance guys, you need leasing agents, you need overall property managers. So you need a team of at least 5 to 7 people on a large apartment complex that you want to own and operate. And then commercial non-residential investing is essentially retail, office, industrial, flex space, any commercial property that you see, Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, all of that stuff falls in this bucket. And then finally, REITs and funds, which are a lot of times owned by private equity companies, is a pool of multiple properties, could be residential, office, retail, storage, industrial, and you're basically buying a share. So it's almost like investing in S&P 500 index fund. The advantage of it is you get diversification, but disadvantage of it is you're basically not beating the market in terms of returns. You're getting average returns because you're trying to reduce the risk a little bit. And also you don't really know what's happening in each one of these properties. So with funds and REITs, a lot of times what happens is the fund managers have a lot of capital they get from investors, and now they have to find a place to park that capital. So when they are under a pressure to park that capital, sometimes they would buy deals that are not bought at the best price. Sometimes I've seen funds overpay for properties, but at the same time, they also have deals in the portfolio that perform really well. And in general, the fund can perform because they have some winners, some losers in the portfolio, and overall it just kind of averages out. But you are extremely passive in this. So if you want to learn real estate investing and how are the properties doing, this would not be the vehicle of choice because you're very much disconnected from the properties and how they are managed and operated. So we dove into apartments right away as soon as we started our investment journey. And the main reason for that was because apartments is a basic human need. Everybody needs a shelter over their head. You know, when affordability crisis comes in, people sell their single family homes or townhomes, move back into apartments, especially in recessions. Cash flow is another advantage of apartments because you have economies of scale. So now let's say if you have to replace a roof, that roof is going to cost $20,000 on a 20-unit apartment building, and it's going to cost around $12,000 on a single family home. But now that 20,000 is distributed around against 20 different units. So you get that economies of scale, which reduces your expense ratio, increases your net income, and therefore increases your cash flow as well. Mortgage pay down, your residents or tenants are paying rent, and that you dedicate towards paying down mortgage. So over the years, you're building equity in the deal, and your tenants are helping you build that equity in the deal. So that's another huge benefit. Another one is strategic forced appreciation, which is unique to, I wouldn't say apartments, but unique to commercial real estate. And I'll have some examples of the math around how this works in some of the follow-up slides. Hedging against inflation, we spoke about that because as inflation goes up, rents also usually go up. So you have a pretty good hedge against inflation when you are investing in rental properties like apartments or any commercial rental property. And then finally, tax benefits, which we also covered, depreciation, 1031 exchange, Section 179. And your CPA would be able to give you more pointers about this. Try to find a CPA who focuses on real estate tax laws. And that way they will be able to provide even more insights into all the tax benefits that you can get. Especially when you have a family of two high-income earners. I have even seen that one partner has quit their job, and let's say the other partner was a medical professional, a doctor, and the other partner quit their job, became a real estate professional, and now they're actually making more money by one person not working than when they were working together because their tax liability was so crazy high. So there are some really good advantages that you can leverage on in terms of tax benefits. Now, one of the most common questions we get, I'm going a little fast, but we are also recording the session, so please feel free to go back to the recording if there's something that you want to listen to again. But because we have a lot of content, I'm just trying to go a little fast so that we can get through everything and still have a little bit of time for Q&A. So one of the most common questions we get is multifamily versus single family, because single family fits in your comfort zone, right? Okay, you're like, with the capital I have, I feel comfortable, I can buy one more single family home. Nothing wrong with that. You know, you can start your journey there, but you have to realize that with single family, and also based on where you are investing in, some of the states are not very landlord friendly. So if you get a bad tenant, evicting that person is going to take you 9 to 10 months. And that person may destroy your property in those 9 to 10 months. So not only are you losing income in those 9 to 10 months, but also there's property damage and just stress due to the legal battle you'll have to go through. So you want to make sure that where you're investing needs to make sense as well. And also do a really thorough background check on the tenants that you're putting in. With the pros with single family houses is they're easier to find. You can find them right on MLS and Redfin, Zillow. They're very easy to finance if you have good credit. You can just get a personal loan to fund your single family home purchase. They're easier to manage. Let's say if they're closer to where you live, you can just swing by every now and then, keep an eye on your property. Usually the tenants take care of landscaping themselves. And sometimes when there are minor issues, you can always call your handyman who can take care of it, right? So relatively easier to manage, easier to sell. You put them back on the market, and if it's seller's market like it is even now, they get grabbed up pretty quickly, and you won't have to worry about having them sit on market for months to sell the property. And then, like I said, tenants can take care of some minor maintenance issues like lawn mowing, changing light bulbs, and stuff like that, which typically does not happen with apartments. Tenants are going to call you for every little thing. Now, on the other hand, the pros of multifamily is economies of scale. More units result in lower vacancy. You have a single family home. Once it's empty, you have 100% vacancy. But with multifamily, you have 100 units. If 5 people leave, you still have 95 units occupied that are income producing. So that gives you a lot more economies of scale. Shared maintenance costs, the roof example that I had spoken about. So same thing, any major maintenance that you have to do on the property, that cost gets split across 100 units rather than spending thousands of dollars just for one unit and one tenant that's paying you back. And then you also have unlimited loan options. You don't have to only rely on personal loans. There are many commercial loan products out there, and you can get really creative with financing these properties. There's better cash flow because the expenses are spread and because of the economies of scale, and there are more profit potential. There's more potential for making profits. Forced appreciation, again, this is a point that keeps coming up, and I'll explain how exactly this works. Professional management, so you can either build your own management company, or there are professional third-party management companies, and this is all they do. That's their main business, is managing large commercial properties. So at some point in our lives, we have stayed in a rental apartment here, and we walk into the leasing office. There is a leasing agent, property manager, there are maintenance guys. All of that is managed by the property management company. So you can either leverage a third-party management company or build your own management company to manage these assets. And then the tax benefits. There are a lot more tax benefits with multifamily commercial real estate, like depreciation, 1031 exchanges, as compared to single family properties. 1031 exchange you can also do with single families, but depreciation, you get a lot higher number when you have a large multifamily property or commercial property. Now, if you look at the cons with single family homes, it's kind of all or nothing, which we spoke about. It's either occupied or 100% vacant. It is hard to scale because you can only get up to 10 loans for buying single family homes on your own name. After 10 loans, you're not going to get more. So that's the limit. And with commercial loans, basically, which are non-recourse loans, they don't get registered against your name. They are on your LLC. So you can even get 1,000 loans. That's how people rack up 8,000, 10,000, 20,000 apartments. It's because they have commercial loans, and they are limited liability non-recourse loans. So if your business fails, they don't come after your personal home and cars and your personal wealth, right? So it also offers a little better asset protection, if you will. Limited to no forced appreciation because your home value depends on how the market is doing. So appraisal of your single family home is going to depend on the neighboring properties, what they are selling for. The appraiser will just look at similar properties in the neighborhood, take an average of that, and that's the value of your home. So when the prices start falling, your home, no matter how beautiful it is, the price is going to start to fall. You cannot control that. And lower rent to expense ratio, meaning, which we talked about, that rent is let's say 200, but your principal, interest, tax, insurance payments itself is 15, 16, 1800 sometimes. So your expenses are actually a big portion of the rent that you're collecting. In apartments, oftentimes our expenses, all inclusive, are about 38, 40%. So 60% goes towards our NOI. And after mortgage payment is made, we can cash flow about 20 to 25%. So it gives you a much better spread and much better opportunities for cash flow. So the cons with multifamily or large commercial properties, though, is they are more expensive to buy. And the banks require you to have a track record before they'll give you a commercial loan. They want to see your commercial real estate investing resume. How many deals have you done? How have you stabilized them? Are they cash flowing? They will ask you for financials on all your properties. So every time we apply for a new loan, I have to send all the information about all the properties, all the financials, trailing 12 reports, P&L reports. So it becomes a little cumbersome. But once you have that proven track record, it becomes easier and easier to get financing for more properties that you want to buy. It is hard to find deals because other investors are looking at deals like vultures. So it is very competitive. So you need to have a really strong relationships with brokers, relationships with sellers. That way you are able to find these deals before anyone else finds them. Or you find something unique about that deal that no one else has seen, but it is very hard to find these deals. So finding these deals is oftentimes a full-time job for one person. All they are doing is looking at deals, analyzing them, and building relationships with brokers. And then management is very intensive. When you're managing 100 unit, 200 unit apartment building, there are 200 tenants or 200 families rather that you have to tend to the needs of. So it is very management intensive. So that's one of the cons, if you will. So this is the simple math, and this is what I would like to now focus on to explain forced appreciation. So commercial properties are appraised based on the net operating income. It's very much like a business appraisal. When you are trying to buy or sell a business, they will look at your NOI, and then you usually can buy a business, depending on the type of business, for 3x or 5x equity multiple of your NOI. So similarly, the appraisal for multifamily or commercial properties in general is based on the NOI. What is NOI? NOI is basically your annual income that the property produces minus annual operating expenses. So this does not include debt service, meaning your mortgage, because mortgages can go up and down based on the interest rates in the market. That is not reflective of the property condition and how the property is doing, which is why NOI does not include debt service, and that's why NOI is the number we look at. So annual income minus annual operating expenses. So this includes your taxes, your insurance, your repairs and maintenance costs, all of that type of stuff that is the expenses required to run the property. Now, what is capitalization rate? Capitalization rate is basically your annual net operating income divided by the purchase price of the property. On the flip side, the purchase price of the property oftentimes is annual NOI divided by the cap rate. Cap rate is market dependent. So this is one thing that you don't have control over. When the market is great, people are paying more and more for the properties, cap rate contracts or it becomes smaller. And because cap rate is in the denominator, when you calculate the purchase price, smaller the cap rate, higher the value of the property, which is why in a nicer, better market, cap rate starts to go down. In a recession, when there is fear in the market, cost of capital goes up, the cap rate actually decompresses, and then cap rate starts to go up. So cap rate is one thing that is very much market dependent. Cap rate in Cincinnati is going to be very different from cap rate in San Diego versus Dallas, Texas. And it is also dependent on the asset type. If it's a 80-year-old asset, 40-year-old asset, or if it's a brand new construction, the cap rate is going to be different, right? In simple terms, what is cap rate? If you buy a property in all cash and you don't have any leverage or mortgage on it, what is the type of return you can expect? So if you buy a $5 million property and give them a suitcase of cash, $5 million, and if that property produces 3% return on your investment, 3% is your cap rate. So that's basically the definition. And then your cash on cash return is your true ROI. So annual cash flow is basically your NOI, because NOI is your income minus all your expenses except for debt service. Cash flow is now that NOI minus your final expense, which is the mortgage payments. That gives you your net profit or cash flow. And cash on cash return is your annual net profit or cash flow divided by cost of the property, acquisition cost. And that will give you your cash on cash return. And that's your true cash flow. So our goal is usually almost always to maximize the cash flow, because cash flow, as we all know, is the lifeline of any business. So to make sure you have good liquidity to pay for expenses and stuff like that, you have to make sure your cash on cash returns are good. And you have to make sure that at least 1 year after acquisition, the property begins to cash flow. Sometimes it takes 12 to 18 months to stabilize the property when you're buying a value add property or a big renovation project. But after that, it needs to cash flow so that the income produced by the property is more than enough to cover all the expenses from the property. And then there is a little bit left over that can now be distributed to the investors. So that's basically the simple math. I'll be sharing all these slides as well. That way we can review this later as well. But this is an example now of a true property that we bought in 2022, 63 units apartment complex. At acquisition, the NOI of this property was $276,105 annual NOI. The cap rate in that market at the time was 6.5. The best source to find this information is tools like CoStar, IRR. These are very expensive tools to get access to. Yardi is another one. So typically real estate brokers, commercial real estate brokers have access to these tools. You can always make a friend with a real estate broker and get this data from them. Property market value, therefore, is NOI divided by cap rate, which is 276,105 divided by, because this is a percentage, divided by 0.065, 4.25 million. And that is exactly what we paid for the property. We bought it for 4.25 million. Now, in April 2024, our last 12 months of NOI was $348,612. How did it jump up so much? Well, the market has obviously helped. The rent growth has been extremely strong. And then we have renovated more than half of the property. We have done exterior renovations, interior renovations. So a lot of CapEx spend and better management. So we brought in a third-party management company who has been extremely good to work with, and they always have their fingers on the pulse. So by improving operations, by improving the property condition, and the market also helping us to some extent, all these three factors play a huge role in improving your property performance and the NOI. At the same time, the cap rate actually dropped in this market. This is a high demand market. So the cap rate actually dropped. People are paying more and more for properties in this market. So now the broker opinion of value or market property value came in at 348,612 divided by 0.060, 5.81 million. So that's 1.56 million in equity creation in just about 2 years. And that is something very difficult to achieve when you buy a single family home, because you are at the mercy of the market. Even if you are getting more and more rent, it's not contributing towards the appraised value of the property. So this is the beauty of commercial real estate, is if you do a good job with operating the property and improve the NOI, you are essentially increasing the value of the property. Now, if we get into not only a recession, but a depression, that cap rate may actually expand and become even 10%. And if it becomes 10%, then the property value is going to drop to 3.48 million, which is lower. So we actually lose equity. But as long as the property is cash flowing and we are not losing our shirt on this property, you can just hold the property until the market recovers. And as long as, just like with any other investment, with even stocks, as long as you can hold long term, and as long as you have the discipline to hold it long term, you will do fine. But the beauty of this is at least you're never going to lose all of your capital, which could happen in a stock if the company fails, right? So let's see, how are we doing on time? Okay, 53 minutes in. So our strategy at the high level is analyze the target market, really deep dive into the market, look at the rent growth, look at the employers coming in, look at the property values, but about 12 attributes that we look at, crime rate being one of them, average median household incomes. And then once we analyze the market, we try to find properties where we can add value. So we can add value operationally, we can add value by beautifying the property, renovating the property. And then third aspect is the market adds value. If we are buying a property in the path of progress, then automatically the neighborhood comes up. There is a lot of investment dollars coming to that neighborhood, and we just ride the wave up, right? So it's those three things that we look at when we look at a value add property. Make an offer. So underwrite the deal. Our underwriting is like a massive spreadsheet with 7-8 different tabs. So we can have a separate session or even a 3-month class on just underwriting. So we do really deep dive underwriting. That's why we have data scientists on the team. So we look at all the numbers and make sure that what we are paying for the property not only makes sense today, but even if 5 years down the road, if we are in worse off of a market, we are still going to do fine. So we do that stress test analysis to make sure that we are not overpaying for a property. Because once you overpay for a property, that's a mistake that's very difficult to fix. That's a permanent mistake. Only if the market significantly goes up, only then you can recover from that mistake. But otherwise, overpaying is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. Once negotiations are done, then we get it under contract, inspect the property, do the due diligence. There are about 50 different items that we look at for due diligence, look at all the leases, utility bills, walk every single apartment, interview every tenant, all of this stuff, in physical inspection, to assess the condition of the asset. So the due diligence process lasts for about a month. And then once that's done, we close on the property, we manage it for the next 5 to 7 years. In management, it's basically property management, which is on the ground management, and then asset management, which is looking at financials, looking at KPIs, how are we doing in terms of property performance. And then after about 5 to 7 years of good performance, we have increased the value of the property, and then we liquidate the property. And most of the profits come from actual liquidation of the property or at exit. So that's our strategy, but it's a very common strategy. It's not rocket science, and really anyone can do it. The only thing is every step of this process is a lot of work. So you have to just make sure that either you have a great team to do that, or you're relying on a great team to do that, right? So moving on, since we are talking about teams, one of the most common vehicles of investing passively in deals. So for example, you're not looking to quit your job anytime soon and you want to invest in real estate, but you don't want to do the work yourself. One of the most common vehicles is syndication. A lot of you may be familiar with syndication. Some of you on the call are actually our partners on syndication deals. Syndication is nothing but actually we can draw a lot of parallels with buying a stock in a company, right? But except other than the main difference is you're not investing in, let's say, index fund, you're investing in Apple stock. So you know exactly what you're buying. That is a syndication. So essentially syndication has two roles: active partners, which is like the C-suite in a company. They do all the work. So C-suites and employees of the company. And you have passive investors, which is like people who buy the stocks in that company. So the capital comes from passive investors. So essentially the definition is group of investors who pool their resources, that is time, knowledge, and money, to buy a large real estate asset, and then they collectively share the benefits and the profits. So this is basically drawing a parallel with a company. So general partners is like the management team or the C-suite. Limited partners, who are the investors, they bring in the capital. They are the investors in a company. And then vendors, partners, contractors that run the property and property management, they are basically like the employees of the company who run the day-to-day. So that's basically the similarity between the syndication structure and running a company, a corporate. So what are the LPs or limited partners required to do? So after they make an investment in a property, they become passive investors. They get monthly or quarterly updates. They get monthly or quarterly distributions from the cash flow. That's almost like getting a dividend from a stock. And then essentially after that, they just get cash flow payments. And at the end of the asset life cycle, at exit, they get their originally invested capital back plus profits from the sale. GPs are available to answer their questions at all time, but all the work is done by the GPs or general partners. So usually, if not all the GPs, portion of the GPs will be located in the city where the property is owned. So they are more boots on the ground. They are visiting the property. They're talking to property managers, contractors, making sure the property is run well. And some of the GPs could be not geographically located in that same area, but they are doing other tasks, right? Like investor relationship management, asset management, looking at the numbers and KPIs, so on and so forth. So in terms of syndication responsibilities, the LPs, this image, I think, makes it very clear. They pull in the funds go in LLC. The LLC buys the property. Now, GPs also put in some of their own capital. That way, everybody's interests are aligned into that LLC. But that LLC is controlled by the GPs, right? So the LPs don't have control over the property, but they have ownership stake in the property. And the control is all by GPs. So in terms of factors, GPs versus LPs, most of the risk is taken by GPs. So in terms of liability, signing on the loans, being responsible for loan payments and all of that, the risk is all taken by the GPs. On the LP side, the only risk that you have is the money that you have invested in. So 50K that you have invested in, if everything goes down the drain, that is the risk that you have, but no one can sue you. No bank can come after you because you're not signing on any of the loans. In terms of time commitment, GPs put in most of the time. LPs only put a little bit of time to keep an eye on the quarterly updates, how the property is performing, so on and so forth. Capital, GPs put in small portion of the capital. Most of the capital comes from LPs or limited partners. Tax benefits, both parties get equal tax benefits. Control, majority of it sits with the GPs. And then profits, GPs get, so for example, if they are putting in 10% of the capital, typically they'll get 30 to 40% of the profits because they're also putting in the sweat equity over the 5 to 7 years. And then majority of the profits are still given back to the LPs. So the most common split that we see is a 70-30 split, where the GPs keep 30% of the profit for all the work that gets put in, and LPs keep 70% of the profit for bringing in the capital to make the deal possible. So it's a true partnership, and this is all SEC regulated. So essentially, the LPs get paid first before GPs get paid $1. So there are other terms like preferred returns and stuff like that, which we can dive into in a later conversation. But the structure is designed so that the LPs get paid first, and then the GPs get paid, and they get more advantages or more bonuses, if you will, if the property performs better than projected returns. So it's very similar to running a corporate, where when the company does much better in terms of performance at the end of the year, the CEO gets a pretty fat bonus, right? So it's basically the same concept. So if we look at history of rentals and just overall market overview, what's happening is in the US, home ownership rate is actually consistently dropping and rentership is growing. That is one reason for that is lack of affordability, because house prices have gone up tremendously while the salaries have not really gone up that much. But also the Gen Z wants to be nomadic. They want to live in Austin, Texas for a year, then they want to move to Denver, Colorado, then they want to spend a year in Bali, then they want to come back to the West Coast. So they don't want to buy a home and be stuck with it. And they don't want to deal with the headaches of home ownership and the maintenance that comes with it. So a lot of the younger population is actually renting, which is a good thing for us as investors. We can invest in these rental properties because the demand is steadily going up. At the same time, the supply actually dropped significantly after 2008 recession. So these are the number of homes being built every decade in the US, and it just tanked after the 2010 recession. And that undersupply, we still haven't caught up. So it's going to take another 4 to 5 years of a lot of construction to meet the lack of supply. And the problem is now the supply again is coming to a standstill or construction because of the rising interest rates. So I think for the near future, we have a really favorable demand and supply equation that favors us investors. Now, this is just a market cycle. The source of this data is Integra Real Estate Resources, IRR, which also is the largest company that does appraisals of real estate properties in the US. So you can have access to this data if you go to IRR's website. It basically every quarter they'll release this market cycle report, and that will show you which properties are in which part of the market cycle, which areas are in recession, which are in expansion, so on and so forth. And it doesn't mean that, okay, if you find a property in recession, let's say Chicago, it doesn't mean you should never touch a property in Chicago. It only means that make sure that when you're buying a property in Chicago, knowing that Chicago has a little bit of a recession, you get a really, really good deal if you're buying in Chicago, right? The other thing, obviously, is landlord-friendly rules. Some of these cities like Chicago may not be the most landlord-friendly, while some of the states, especially Republican states, tend to be extremely landlord friendly. So the rules are on the side of investors. If the tenant stops paying rent, they can be out within a month. While in a lot of the blue states, the tenants have squatters' rights and all sorts of rights, and then it's going to take you a long time to get them out. And some tenants are actually professional tenants. They know all the laws that are on their side, and they're going to take advantage of every single law that's on their side. So you want to be careful of that when you invest in any market. So key lessons for us, I'll try to breeze through this fairly fast. We've firmly believed in starting small. Go big or go home approach. We don't believe in that, because when you start small, you make smaller mistakes. Your profits are smaller, but at the same time, your mistakes are smaller. So when you start making these smaller mistakes, you learn from them, and then you slowly scale. That has been our philosophy from day one. And that has served us quite well, because we have made a lot of mistakes when I was buying my own properties, and I learned a lot of lessons through that. And the only way to compensate for that was putting in a lot of my personal time. But when you buy a large deal with millions of dollars at stake, some of these mistakes, you just can't afford to make them, which is why we firmly believe in starting small. With smaller deals, you have a lot more of lending options, like small community banks that lend only up to, let's say, $5 million. You can actually use them. With large 20, $30 million commercial assets, you have to either use agency debt, which is Freddie and Fannie loans. But if the property is not stabilized, agency doesn't lend on it. So you have to work with bridge debt. And some of you who are familiar with these terms will know that a lot of people who bought properties in floating interest rate bridge debt are suffering heavily now, because their mortgage payments more than doubled. And those properties are in a really bad shape right now. So that's another lesson learned. And finally, starting small is always good for your reputation, because as you learn, as you grow, you build your reputation. If you start big day one, you're going to make bigger mistakes, and you're going to toss that reputation right down the drain, because it takes forever to build reputation, but it takes a minute to destroy it. So I was talking about team and operations and a big team. What I was referring to is this, right? So when you're looking at larger properties, you need an external team and you need an internal team. So external team comprises of your contractors who are going to help to fix the property, your commercial brokers. You need very good relationships with them. I meet brokers every Friday over coffee, lunches, breakfast, so that they keep me in mind when they have a deal, and they send those deals to us before they get placed on the market. And then there is a feeding frenzy, right? Attorneys, you want really good real estate attorneys on your side who are reviewing all the contracts. You want good tax CPAs and real estate CPAs on your side. That way you're taking advantage of all the tax laws that are on your side as an investor. Title companies who can help with quick, prompt closings. Mortgage brokers and lenders. For financing these properties, you need very, very good relationships with lenders, because a lender who doesn't know you will not have faith on you. So obviously the lenders are going to underwrite the deal. They'll see if the deal has legs, but lenders often make faith-based decisions. So they'll see the deal looks great on paper, but then they'll also say that, oh, I know these guys have pulled off some really good deals in the past, and I think we can lend to these set of people. So that reputation with lenders and brokers is extremely important. Insurance agent, so to get best possible insurance quotes on your properties. Property managers, they are going to run the day-to-day operations of your property, so extremely important person on your team. And then finally, architects, surveyors, environmental surveys, and stuff like that. So I might have missed a few on here, but there's a lot of people that you need to be connected with if you're trying to take down a larger deal. Internally, if you're trying to take down a larger deal, you either need this team yourself, or you start working with someone who already has this team. That way you get involved in their deals, you learn how they are managing their deals, and maybe at some point you can try to build a team of your own if you want to get into active investing. Or if you want to stay as a passive investor, you just continue to invest with this team. right? Where the team has a deal finder, an underwriter, or a team of underwriters, construction management and stabilization, boots on the ground, local person to keep an eye on the construction team, and so on. Asset management, which is we track about 50 KPIs as a part of asset management. So making sure that the construction team is hitting their targets, making sure that our finances, or actual NOI versus targeted NOI, we are actually meeting our targets. So these are just some examples. There are many such KPIs that the asset manager has to keep a close eye on. Raising the capital and getting the funds collected to make the deal possible. And then finally, once you have the investors, you have to keep communicating with them. That is all investor relations, right? So every month you have to send out communications, answer their questions. We need a person who is primarily in charge of that. That way we are not losing sight of our investors. And finally, operations and financial oversight. Someone like a CFO who keeps a close eye on the T12, the P&Ls, the balance sheet, and highlights any key risks that we may have. Do we have credit risk? Do we have liquidity risk? What kind of risks are we exposed to right now? So all of these team members are very important, and it takes time to build this type of a team. So I think that was the kind of the main crux of the content that I wanted to cover today. But we have some case studies. I'm not going to cover all of them in detail, but I'm going to share the slides so you can go through as to what it means. How does the deal pencil out? What does the before and after look like? This was our first property, 8 units. These are the actual pictures of the property and how it looks now. But this was a 1929 property, extremely distressed, that we bought 50,000 per unit. So 400,000 for the property. And essentially the rehab cost was about 220. Pre-rehab rent was 450 a month. And now this is renting at 1,000 per month per unit. And the property, so for example, 400,000 is the purchase price plus renovation, 220. So the total spend really was 620, and it's not even a true total spend because 300,000 out of that 400,000 is a loan, right? So it's not coming out of my pocket. So true total spend is 320K, but the property appraised for 800,000 after it was all fixed up. So technically, I have $0 invested in the property now after a cash out refinance. So the cash on cash return on this deal is infinite because I have made zero investment, but it pays me $4,000 a month. So this is actually possible. Of course, the market has to be favorable as well, but it is very much possible with real estate. So this is the before and after. When we bought the property, this is what it looked like. Lots of holes. The decks collapsed as we were halfway through. Dated property, and then we converted it to a more modern looking property. And it's the rinse and repeat. 10-unit property, but old property. This is how it looked like. This is what it looks like now. Same thing, infinite return deal. This was a syndication deal that we did. Again, old dated property, but all 2 bedrooms, spacious units, reserved covered parking for all the units. So we just brought it back to 2021 by rebranding the property and just improving the property overall by making it look a lot nicer. So all the dated units were converted to much modern finishes. And this is what the property looks like right now. And the rents here went from 550 to 600 to about 1,000 now. This is our most recent project that we finished. This property was a disaster. I think the pictures tell the same story. Fire damage, black mold, squatters, drug abuse, you name it. There was everything at this property. But we bought it for dirt cheap, about $27,000 per apartment. And then we are now completely done with renovations. And this is what that property now looks like. And $27,000 per door, $20,000 per door in renovations. But now it's going to appraise at roughly $85,000 per door. So this is how you create value in real estate. It is a lot of work, but once you are able to solve these problems here, you can create significant value. And now these assets are worth a lot more. Now, if we were having this standard flipper mindset, I would immediately sell the property for profit. But then I'm not taking advantage of the cash flow. So buy and hold investor is all about delayed gratification, that we put in a lot of money in this property. We put in a lot of time and work and energy into this property. Now let's do a cash out refinance, liquidate, take advantage of some of the locked in equity that we have built in the deal. But now let's just hold the property, operate it, and enjoy the cash flow for the next 5 to 7 years. That way you get the best of both worlds. You get some profit day one, and then you get cash flow for next 5 to 7 years, which is truly your residual income. And then more examples of similar types of properties that we have worked on. The NOI example I shared was for this property. This is the 63 unit, which was, I think, our fifth or sixth property that we bought. Again, was a little dated looking. We just rebranded it, new parking lot, new exteriors, renovated the insides of the property, and it now looks a lot better. And the NOI, as you saw, is a lot higher as well. So we have some resources as well that we put out for education. We have a YouTube channel where we put out monthly educational webinars. And then we do a monthly investor summit. This actually just happened last week. So these are the pictures from our investor summit. These are my parents here who are also on the webinar right now. So they got to see the real estate community. So it was a great experience for them as well. We send out monthly newsletters, which also have some educational content. And then we do monthly webinars, which get converted to YouTube videos on our channel as well. So that is basically it. With that, I think I'm going to shut up and open it up for questions. So let me unmute everyone. All right, so now you should be able to unmute yourself. And if there are any questions that come up, I'm happy to take questions. Okay, alternatively, you can drop your questions in the Q&A box. And if there are no questions, that's fine too. Oh, we have some questions coming in. How can full-time professionals like us work with you for multifamily investments? So the syndication model that I spoke about, as full-time professionals, you can invest in syndications. And even as an H-1B or someone on a L-1 or work visa, you're allowed to invest in a syndication because syndication is seen as a similar investment as buying a stock in a company. So you can be involved in these vehicles as full-time professionals and even on a work visa. If you're not on a work visa, if you, let's say, have a green card or citizenship, then you can be a part of joint venture deals as well. Because in a joint venture, typically everybody has to sign on the loan and you become a member of the LLC. That violates, and you want to check this with an immigration attorney as well. But when you're reliant on your employer for your immigration status, you cannot be a part of another business. So joint ventures typically open to green card holders and citizens. Syndications will be open for anyone. So I actually had personally invested in a syndication while I was still on my H-1B visa. So, and a full-time employee with Deloitte. So hopefully that answers your question. And then as someone new to CRE, how do I figure out who I can invest money with? That is a great question. And probably the only thing you need to figure out, because once you have found a good person and good team to invest with, they will do the job for you. It's all about the team. It's the same thing that Warren Buffett does, right? When he invests in businesses, he only looks at the leadership team. And once he has full faith in the leadership team, he goes and buys that business. So it's all about the people. So I would say that whichever company, whichever group that you are investing with in a syndication, get to know them, set up calls with them, get to know them, get to know how they operate, but also what their ethics and values are. And once you feel comfortable with that, then you can start investing with them. And you can always start small. Don't invest $1 million in the first deal, but start small. Usually 50K is the minimum for syndications, and then see how they perform, and then continue. If you like working with them, you can continue working with them. But I think getting to know the team is going to be crucial. How can I pivot?
Hi, my name is
Yes.
Can
Go
you hear
ahead.
me?
Yes.
So I have two questions. First question is, I want to know what is there like a minimum investment you should think of if you're doing in a syndicate type of model? And second question is, say, for example, if I am investing 100K in a syndicate model, how much ROI should I expect in like every year and, kind of that?
Yeah, no, both good questions. Minimum amount invested for syndications typically ranges between 50 and 100K, depending on the syndication group. For us, our minimum is 50K, but some of the larger groups, they keep 100K, or I've even seen 200K with some groups as the minimum. The reason they start to increase the minimums is because they want to cut down the number of investors in each deal. Because when you are buying a $30 million deal, and if you do a 50K minimum, you will have hundreds of investors, and it becomes difficult to manage hundreds of investors. But basically, 50 to 100K is typically the minimum. Now, typical returns, that's the difference, that when you invest in a REIT or a fund, they will give you an idea that, okay, typically the fund is projected to make 10% return across the lifetime of the fund. But when you are investing in a syndication, you are actually investing in that specific asset, and every asset is going to have a different story. So that asset could be an asset that needs a lot of renovations, and which means that you may get a little bit of a cash flow, but huge appreciation because you're adding a lot of value. But another asset could be a brand new construction where you can have day one cash flow, but you may not have a lot of appreciation because you're already paying market price to buy a brand new building. So it will depend on the asset, it will depend on the market, but in general, you can look for a total return of 2x. So 100K invested should give you a total return of 200,000 over 5 to 7 years. And when I say a total return, that is a collection of cash flow collected from rental income, profits from exit, and tax benefits. So if you sum that up, you'll get about 2x equity multiple over 5 years. So that's kind of the average syndication deal.
Okay, thanks. And one more follow-up question on that. So, if I'm considering which states or which areas should be good for investment at this point, like where can I get those guidelines?
So real estate market data, there are tools like CoStar, Yardi, where you can get that information. Yardi also has both of these, CoStar and Yardi. I'll put those names in the chat box here. They also have a lot of free tools, so free resources for investors. And then you also have websites from brokers like CBRE, Marcus Millichap. They have a lot of free content, and they publish a lot of data about markets. So these are good resources to study on and get some information about different markets, which are great for investing. But I would also say that, you may find a really good market. Like, for example, 5 years ago, Dallas was a phenomenal market. Now, of course, there's a lot of oversupply coming to Dallas, so it's changing. But if you don't have a really good partner in Dallas, then it may still not be the best market for you. So the question really is not only to find the best market, but to find the best market for you, where you have a good partner and team that can operate. Because you can find the best market and the best deal, but if the team cannot operate, your investment is not going to produce good results. So.
Okay. Sure, thank you.
Jaideep, I just have my name is Srinivas Lokre. I just have a follow-up question on what Sudesh was asking and your response. So if somebody's trying to get into this investment option, what are those steps one should go through? Like you rightly mentioned, the finding the right partners or finding the right market. So how to decide what is priority? Because one might not go with other. So how we go step by step?
I think there is no right or wrong answer for priority, but there is just a checklist that you would have to go through. As long as you go through that checklist, it doesn't matter what order you go in, but typically knowing a couple of good markets is a good start. You need to know why you're looking at those markets. But at least personally for me, finding the right partners and the right people has always been the priority. So because I can find someone who's a rock star in a dud market and they can make money for me. But I can find an average operator in the best market, but they won't perform because this is a lot of work. It's 5 to 7 years of business plan execution. And typically the operators don't really get paid much during the operations phase. They really get paid at exit when the deal is actually making most of its profit. So you have to find someone who is very motivated and has their values in the right place, because if you have to work on this for 5 to 7 years for fairly minimal compensation, you need to find someone whose heart is in the right place. And that is why we have seen some syndicators fail, because they were banking on the acquisition fees, the one-time fee that they collect when they close the deal to pay their bills, and the property was now not performing, and the investors are the one taking the loss, right? So all of those aspects I think are important, but I would say finding the right teams and partners should be the priority. Then look at the market also. Market does make a difference. You don't want to be in the worst market. But even mediocre markets are good, in terms of what your goals are, cash flow versus appreciation, or a mix of both. So, but I think those two are the main things. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And my one follow-up question would be, I'm in Houston, and we've been seeing like a lot of growth in real estate in a way, like getting open land and then developing it for residential properties. Now, in your experience, have you looked at these two options, like where going from already built to renovation versus going from an open land to the new residential buildings? Are there any pitfalls or like pros and cons in either of these options?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We are slowly beginning to explore new construction. No experience yet. The reason for that is new construction projects are also higher risk. They're higher reward, but they're higher risk projects as well. It takes a long time for the property to start cash flowing. And it usually is more of a 10-year business plan as opposed to a 5 to 7 year value add business plan. So there is definitely a place for new construction in portfolio, but currently the cost of construction is also very high and cost of capital is also high, which is why making sense of a new construction deal is very difficult. You have to be in a market where the rents are extremely high to do new construction. You have to be in a market where the city or the county is giving you some tax advantages or giving you some dollars and subsidies to build, because cost of construction per unit is somewhere between 250 to 300,000, and on top of that, holding costs. So unless you're getting $3,000 in rents, it's going to be hard to cash flow. And there are not many places in the US where you can actually get $3,000 plus in rents. It's only certain markets, but those certain markets are even more expensive to buy land and build. So that is a fine balance, which is why when you do a new construction project, you cannot do 40 units, 50 units, 60 units. It typically starts to make sense when you start building 100 plus units, if you want to embark on that project. And then that becomes a very capital intensive project. And quite honestly, we are not there yet. When we can actually raise $10 million to take down $30 million deal, then we will look at new construction deal and also bring on someone with new construction experience, like a developer on the team. So that's my long-winded way of answering that question.
No problem. Thank you.
Jay, this is Prasanna Joshi, and thank you very much for this awesome session. Great to hear something I'm trying to venture into. But having said that, quick question that I had was, one was syndication that you mentioned. What was the other way where you mentioned that we can still be part of the investing community when it comes to real estate? And then on a similar note, what is the ROI on those kind of investments other than syndicate?
ROI is in many cases similar, but in syndication, what happens is there is a tiered approach where if the deal outperforms pro forma, the general partnership team gets paid more money, right? They get 60-40 split instead of 70-30 split. Joint ventures a lot of times are a straight split. So if the deal outperforms, everybody gets paid more, right? It's more of a uniform split. Other than that, there are some other differences that joint venture, you cannot do it with 100 people. Joint ventures usually are good for smaller deals because typically anything over 10 people, you're raising some eyebrows. That becomes a bit of an SEC violation because in joint venture, everybody needs to be active in the deal. Everybody needs to actively participate and do something actively in terms of operations. And it becomes difficult to make that argument that, oh, 20% JV and everybody is actively doing something, which is why JV is a vehicle suitable for smaller deals and where everybody has some active role or responsibility in the deal. So it's not a true passive way of investing, joint venture. So
Okay.
did I answer that question?
Yeah, you did. And do you also deal with joint ventures, or it's just the syndicate?
We do both, depending on the asset type. If we find a 20-unit property, let's say, then we structure it as a JV. If we find something larger, 50 units and up, we typically structure that as a syndication.
Okay. And one last question. The syndication and everything that we talked about, is it kind of similar to what crowdfunding is, or it's something different?
It is similar. It is similar to crowdfunding, but many times in crowdfunding, you're also investing in multiple assets. In syndication, you're investing in that one asset. So when you get reporting and quarterly updates, you know exactly what property you have invested in, how is that property performing, and then you can go travel and go see that property, right? So once a year, you're more than welcome to see the property. A lot of times crowdfunding is a portfolio of assets.
Mhm.
And in that case, you don't really get a view into how individual assets are performing. So similar concept where you're pooling the capital to take down a larger investment opportunity, but some minor differences in terms of how overall capital is deployed. So
Thank you very much, Jay.
how can I pivot from single family residential investing to multifamily? So I would base that answer based on where you're located. So Pramod Mane, may I ask, where are you located?
California.
California. So I would say that, buying a multifamily property in California is it's going to get very expensive, price per door, and it's going to be very difficult for you to cash flow in California. So that leaves you with one option: buying multifamily property in a market that makes sense. Could be Sunbelt, could be Midwest. These are really the only two locations where you can expect cash flow. But now if you live in California and you want to invest in these locations, I have seen people where they have deployed capital and they've bought multifamily properties thousands of miles away, and they try to manage it themselves remotely. And I'll tell you that it is a very, very, very difficult task, because the property manager on ground, he or she is more interested in filling their own pockets rather than making sure the property performs very well for you, right? So they are going to overcharge on materials, stuff like that. So when you are trying to transition from single family homes, which you may have in California, to buying a multifamily property in a market that makes sense, I would again recommend try to find a partner to work with. Salil Joshi on this call is actually my partner on one of the deals that we just closed. And we are working on many real estate deals actively together. And Salil is based in West Coast as well. So that's just an example. Ameya Kulkarni on this call is our partner on one of the deals as well. So that's how you can get involved in multifamily properties while making sure that there is actually a team on the ground doing the work and you're getting quarterly reports. And then you can also get involved in joint venture deals eventually, where the team on the ground is doing everything that needs to be done on the ground, but remotely you can assist with asset management and stuff like that, where you are playing an active role and jointly owning the property. So I think it does take a little bit of a mindset shift to go from an asset that you completely own, operate, and control to starting to work with a team. But once you start working with a team, you can go after larger stuff and play off of each other's strengths. And actually, collectively, the returns look a lot better. So I would say just one is education. Start reading up on multifamily investing and how it works. And I'm more than happy to do a one-on-one session with you and recommend some books that which would be a great starting point, and then find your team. So
okay, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I will take up on your offer then. Yeah, thank you.
thank you, Pramod. Next question is, do you need to be an accredited investor for investing in syndications? Yes and no. It depends on the syndication type. There are two types of syndications. One is called 506B and the other one is 506C. So the difference is in 506B, you cannot, like as a syndicator, I cannot advertise that deal on social media and advertise it to people that I don't know. So any investor that I take in, I have to have a pre-existing relationship with. So they could be my friend, relative, but I have to prove that I know this person before they got into our deal. So that's 506B. And for 506B, you don't have to be an accredited investor. But 506C are the deals where we can heavily market on social media, on radio, on TV, billboards. But when we start to market, SEC requires that, hey, if you're heavily marketing to someone, then the investor needs to be accredited. So that way they're not falling for the marketing and taking unnecessary risks that could lead to losing of all of their capital that they have. So the accredited investor, SEC sees them as a more professional investor who knows what they're doing, right? So I think that, so yeah, so depending on whether you are accredited or not, there is a vehicle for you, 506B or C. So, and as a accredited investor, you can invest in both 506B and C. So, let's see the next question. Salil, yes. Have investments in Ohio, Dayton, Columbus, and now Cincinnati with Jaideep. Happy to connect with folks in the Bay Area. Perfect. Thank you, Salil. Milind Kanitkar, how can one become a partner or get to know what projects are available investments to be GP or LP? I'll be honest, becoming a GP when you're new to real estate investing is very difficult because you don't really have experience. So once you become a part of the team, what are you bringing to the table, right? Because anytime the team gives you equity, you have to bring something in return. So sometimes though, I have seen that the GP, for first-time GPs, they basically write a big check. They bring in a big amount of capital, and in exchange, they get some minor responsibilities, but they get to be a part of the GP team and learn how to operate the asset on a day-to-day basis, right? So they get an inside scoop of the business, if you will. So that is the only way I've seen, or in some rare cases, there have been people, especially younger guys, who are very hungry to become a GP and be actively invested in real estate, but they don't have the capital. So they do cold calling and they try to find a really good deal for us to buy. And then they bring the deal to the table. So as long as you're willing to bring something to the table, there could be a case made for you to be a GP on the team. But otherwise, if you're, let's say, starting out with 50K in initial investment, the best place to start with would be LP. As LP, you still get continuous updates. You can still see what's happening with the property. And I know several people who have started as an LP and now have become GPs after they have understood the whole process. So.
Perfect. Jay, and if I thank you for answering that question, by the way, Milind Kanitkar here. And what's the, if I may ask follow-up, what's the typical, transition period? I understand the learning curve that you just mentioned, but what is the typical average learning curve for any novice, starting in this and graduating into GP?
Right. I would say the learning curve is going to be different for different people. It will all depend on how much time you want to invest into getting a hang of real estate and analyzing deals, underwriting deals, learning asset management. So essentially, like, learning real estate for me has been a lot of self-learning. I've read over 30 books on multiple topics, and I've spent over $70,000 in getting a lot of coaching. So asset management coaching, underwriting classes, market review and market analysis classes. So it was almost like I've spent on tuition, right? So it will require investment in education and investing your time and money in education. And then it will require you to invest in some of the deals where you now are becoming the part of the deal. And then the team starts to see that, wow, like you're putting in a lot of time, you really want to learn, you're investing a lot of time in learning. And now the team will basically spot you. And rather than you having to ask that, hey, I want to be the GP, the team will ask, hey, you want to be a GP on our next deal? So it's basically, I personally see that as earning your GP spot on the team that you enjoy working with. And it will require, at least like 2 to 3 years of a lot of commitment, but it is possible. I've seen people do it quite a bit.
Yep.
So
Thank you.
yeah. So how can one partner projects available for investments? Projects available as investments, LPGP, usually when you get to know different groups like ours, there are several others. You sign up for their newsletters, you sign up on their website, that the form that you fill out. Once that form is filled out, you automatically get added to our investor list. So next time there is a deal, you'll get an email that, hey, we have a property under contract. This is the value add potential. These are the projected returns. And this is when we are doing a webinar to present this offering to you. Then you join those webinars, then decide, is this the right opportunity for you? And then make a decision. So to find out what deals we have coming up, that's the best way. Now, by signing up for this webinar, I have all of your email IDs as well. So if you all don't mind, I can also add you to our newsletters, so you'll stay up to date on not just the educational content, but also any deals that we may have coming up. We don't do too many deals each year. Usually we do like 2 or 3 in a good market cycle. And now with the tricky market, we'll probably do 2 this year, because you want to make sure that everything you buy, you can actually manage. So. Is there any lock-in period for LPs? If yes, what are the lengths of such periods? Yeah, so that's a good question. I think worth addressing, because real estate in general is not a very liquid investment, right? So once you have bought in a property, your capital is stuck in that property until we sell the property. So typically when you invest in a syndication, you are in it for the long haul, 5 to 7 years. And you cannot you can sell a stock, but you cannot sell your portion in a real estate syndication. Now, in very, very rare occasions, if there is an absolute personal emergency, not all groups may do this, but we try to do that, is where, there's a death in the family or something, financial emergency, and you want to sell your share, we can try to find another investor to take your spot and release your 50K, make that change to the operating agreement, but then you will not get any returns on it. So that's kind of like your penalty. You just get the money you originally invested back, but any returns that were produced, you're not going to get those back. So, and then somebody else takes your spot, or maybe one of the GPs buys your spot. So be prepared that this is not a very liquid investment. This is a 5 to 7 year investment. That for passive investors, LPs, what is a good asset mix to minimize risk, maximize profit with all the asset types you mentioned? Yeah, that's a good question. So I have personally not invested in a REIT, so I don't know how they perform. So you may want to do your research on that too. The reason I've always invested in multifamily is because it's a very recession-resistant asset class, but then I've invested across multiple properties. So it is still giving me a decent level of diversification. So you can do the same, where you're investing in some multifamily properties across different markets, across different operators. So let's say if one operator is beginning to have challenges with their operations, at least rest of your investments are spread across different markets and across different operators. On top of that, you can diversify the asset class. You can invest in industrial and flex space or storage investments, because those have done very well in the last few years as well. And the cap rates are actually very close to multifamily, meaning they're as hot as multifamily investments. So that way you have good diversification in asset classes as well. Now, REIT is the most diversified because they'll have office in there, they'll have storage, they'll have multifamily, they'll have everything in there, but you'll really never know what you have invested in. So I feel like it's the most, investing in a REIT is kind of the lazy way of investing, where if you don't want to study the stock market, just want to buy an index fund, which is fine. It all depends on how much effort you want to put into identifying how good the investment is. And especially when you're buying into warehouse investment, industrial investment, storage, or multifamily, and who you're investing with, that's going to take a little bit of more time on your part in doing that research. But that should give you a good diversification. In my opinion, that should give you diversification and better returns than investing in basically a REIT, which is like an index fund. So
yeah, thanks. Great answers. So follow-up question, the industrials and storage type of deals that you mentioned, how to find them? How to go about finding some of those people who do this work, do these investments?
Yeah, there are groups out there who do industrial. So for example, for storage, there's a guy, AJ Osborne. He does only storage deals. I think his website is called Self Storage Income. So if you just Google that name, AJ Osborne, this guy will come up. He specializes in storage. So again, if you, I don't know all the people in all these different spaces, but I know some. And some of the larger operators, even if you Google passively invest in self-storage, some of these operators will come up. Now, are they all good? Probably not. So then once you find those, you'll have to do your due diligence in try to find other investors who have invested in their deal, how their experience was, track record, and how their past deals have done. But there are some big names like that who are, but there are, yeah. So, and then on industrial, I don't know a lot of people who do passive investing, like open up to other investors, but I can always try to find some name. One of the local guys here in Cincinnati, his name is Ash Patel. He does a lot of industrial and those types of deals as well. I don't personally know about all the track record of all the deals that he has done, but he's one of the other guys who does this as well. He doesn't do any multifamily. It's all purely non-residential commercial.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the webinar. This has been very comprehensive information. So thank you very much.
Thank you, AJ. Great. We've got 9 more minutes to go. So if there are any other questions, I can try my best to answer them. Okay. If not, I think we can close the call. Have a wonderful Sunday. And then what I'll do is I'll also get this uploaded to YouTube, and I'll share the recording of this webinar as well with you all in our WhatsApp group. Okay, great. Thank you all for joining. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay.
Yes.